Joe.
Let's call meeting to order. Approval of last meeting minutes.
So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. So time honored tradition here, I guess. This month's employees are celebrating an anniversary that we'd like to recognize. So we have one, Teresa Brown, receptionist, 22 years. Ron Pretty, operations manager, 21 years. Maricela Mustache, fixed route operator, 17 years. Ricky Northington, paratransit operator, 17 years. Wendy Hemsley, administrative assistant, 16 years. Thaxter Higgins, fixed route operator, 15 years. Alma Favaretto, fixed route operator, 5 years. Christina Gibson, paratransit coordinator, 5 years. Nico Del Monte, paratransit operator, 1 year, and Kelly Wormley, paratransit operator, 1 year. So again, we thank those employees for their continued dedication to RMT in the community and thank them for all.
Thank you.
Awesome, and thank you.
Yes, thanks. So just on this month's report, not very much to share. Just wanted to note to the board that on 15th, myself and several other of the agency heads in the state testified before the Senate Transportation Committee on the value of transit. So this is part of that ongoing discussion that the Transportation Committee has been having, mainly in the RTA region. This one was specifically in Springfield to talk more so about funding throughout the state and really opportunity to educate and share the challenges that downstate has, the importance of continuing to fund downstate and just the intricacies of the formula funding and where all that funding goes to and how we're impacted by many of the same things that the Chicagoland is, but certainly being part of the conversation as they have discussion about finding a solution to the RTA region, because downstate also has a looming financial cliff that needs to be addressed as well. So very productive meeting and good questions from the committee. And so we'll be sharing as a state association more information going forward with them about more specifics of what we think that we need. So we're going to share that before. Aside from that, we'll get on to the regular items in the agenda. So first off, finance report E2, payment of bills. We have the Williams McCarthy services rendered for September 24th that was included in the bill or in the packet, as well as the AGHL law services rendered through September 30th of 2024. Are there any questions on either one of those?
No.
Very good. Then we will move on to the approval of the accounts payable invoices. Included in your packet. So this month's total was $1,045,506.13. Were there any questions relative to any of the items on the invoice? I just need to entertain a motion to approve.
Make a motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Great, thank you. And then the next item is Schwab Actuarial Services. We need an approval of payment for an invoice dated September 26, 2024, in the amount of $13,100 to be paid from the pension account. Those for services rendered as part of their annual analysis of the fund.
Make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, great, thank you. And then next item of business is the approval of the unaudited financial statements for August. It was included in the packet. Just generally note, operating revenues up a little over 12% for August and about 2.5% year-to-date expenses. We're still below budget there, 9% for August, a little over 9% for year-to-date. Any questions?
It's good.
If none, then
I'll move that we approve the unaudited financial statements for August 2024.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
great, thank you. And then the final item under finance, we have the pension portfolio review for the period through September 30th, and the pension investment statement for the month ending September 30th. We have Jeff DiBenedetto with us again today to share all of the good news. That's only when he shows up, and there's good news. Regarding.
There's a trend this year, right, Mike?
I like that trend.
Thank you for having me today. Mike thought it made sense for me to come today and report on the 3 calendar quarters and the first fiscal quarter. Because at the end of December, you guys have the auditors and you probably don't want me here for that, so it'll be a longer meeting. I'll start out with Aaron had sent you in your packet the portfolio review that was dated September 30th. If you turn to the second page, the impact of diversification, this is a slide that we use quarterly that kind of judges how we perform versus some blended portfolios. And that top right graph, the ones that you should zero in on are the 70-25 portfolio and the 50-50. We kind of land at the end of September 30th, right in the middle between those two. So our range for a return is somewhere between the 11.4 and the 15.3. And then if you fast forward then to page 6, which is our actual return, on the page it says portfolio overview with the pie chart. You can see in the middle section that we finished with a net return of 11.2. So a little lower than the 50-50 return, although that is not necessarily a bad thing. 2 things. One is because it's a pension, we default to the more conservative side of the investment. And then as well, when the market is hot, as it continues to be this year, we will lag because we have further diversification than any of the benchmarks, any of the indices that we follow. So just to highlight that for you. But on that page, the components have changed. In the top right, you'll see year to date, we started with just under 29 million. We have the full pension contribution reported now, the $1.5 million. If you skip down to the ending value at 9/30, we were just over 32 million with a net investment gain of $3.252 million, which is again that net return of 11.2%. Under the asset allocation, I'll just reference this real quick and you may want to set it aside because in your folders that Aaron provides for you, we did do some rebalancing. So when we get through this report, I'll just highlight some changes that we made to the portfolio as far as allocation goes. The following pages are the details of the investment managers and the performance. Really, as I said, it's been a really good year for the stock market. I could go over any of this in detail, but just to highlight, large cap stocks continue to be the key performer in the portfolio, up about 20%. Both small cap and international are doing well, up 10 and 12. And then bonds, interestingly enough, are performing again with that category up 5.5. That has a lot to do with interest rates going down. As rates go down, the value or the price of the bonds go up. They work like a teeter-totter. So we'll continue to see our bond portfolio do well as interest rates go down. Are there any questions on that calendar year report through 3 quarters of the year? The other package then for the 9/30 then is the fiscal year, which is this one page that says portfolio performance summary. Just want to highlight here, a lot of the data is the same, except that the time range is from 6/30 to 9/30. And we've got a great year started for the fiscal year, up 5.15% year to date. I don't expect that it will continue at this rate through the rest of the fiscal year, but it does give us a good lead into what our return target is for the pension. Any questions on this? Okay, so in your folders, as I mentioned, I brought updated information as of yesterday for the pension portfolio, and then highlighted some data, again, highlighting that the full contribution to the pension has been made. But if you go down to the asset allocation pie chart, you'll see that we've made some rebalancing changes. When we rebalance, it forces us to do what's right in investing, which is sell things that have appreciated and rebalance it to the portfolio. So we're selling high, we're buying low, if you will. So you see that the large cap has been reduced to 28, small international about 10. We increased our bond allocation, which is the right thing to do because that keeps the volatility down in our portfolio because we want to preserve this pension account. We don't want to have to increase the obligation that the district has to contribute each year. And then 5% in alternatives and unconstrained, and then cash to fund our pension obligations. If you turn the page there, the middle column that's highlighted has items highlighted is the net flows column. And what that means is here's where we actually made some rebalancing changes. I just provided that in case you want to know what we sold and what we bought and how we did some rebalancing. We reduced some large cap because again, it did well. We rebalanced within the small cap category as well as selling some to provide for the bonds. We reduced the emerging markets under the international. Then the bond category, you see more of the black numbers, that's where we added to the different bond portfolios. And then finally, on the last page, I just highlighted the cash. That cash will support our pension obligations well into next year when we normally typically would fund the pension to give us additional cash for future pension obligations. Big questions on any of those?
Just to make sure I understand right, you're saying that we changed the allocation of the bonds, but also we are changing kind of what we have bought into or sold within that percentage as well?
Correct. So that's a good question, actually. I'll give you a little history because obviously you're new to the board. We usually manage the portfolio between 50% stocks and 50% bonds and 60% stocks and 40% bonds, somewhere in that range. Because the market has been so good, we kind of let it go, if you will. We captured those returns for the portfolio. So what we did is then we sold some stocks to shore up that bond side and get us back more in alignment with what our traditional allocation was.
Okay. Thank you.
Questions?
Overall, we have an election in 2 weeks, as we talked about last month. That will give us some more certainty of where the money will flow. The markets generally like that. Not much probably will happen in the next month or so, but at the end of the year, we expect that the returns in the portfolio will be the same or higher, which is, again, a good thing for the pension portfolio. So hopefully we'll get a holiday rally. A good holiday for everybody.
Very good. All right. Well, thank you so much, Jeff. Appreciate it as always.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you.
And I won't see you for next year, so happy holidays.
Merry New Year.
Thank you.
Can always stop by.
All right. So moving on to the operations, maintenance, and facilities report. Dan's memo included in the packet detailing each of the areas. Dan, you want to walk us through, starting with the ridership reports?
Yeah, as you scroll past my report, past my memo, you'll see our ridership is up in both sides, fixed route and paratransit. Paratransit, some big gains. As a reminder, we did start our fall service improvements September 1st, so a lot more vehicles on the street, a lot more miles, so the ridership should reflect that. As far as the vehicles go, all four of the new buses are in service. They actually were in service shortly after our last meeting. Demand response, we've been in pretty good shape as far as vehicle availability, which is good because we don't know when we're getting new ones yet. Facilities reports, this weather's been a little crazy, it's 85 and, now it's 40 degrees in here. So, but our staff has gone through and serviced all the HVAC systems for all the buildings, and we're getting ready for the dreaded snowfall. So, all our equipment is in pretty good shape. So, I'll skip over the expansion project for now, because I'm sure Mike wants to talk. We've got a little bit more to talk about on that. Paratransit demand response software. We were able to get all of our people and stops exported from our old software into the new software, with just a couple of issues, couple of addresses they can't find, and
One that got resolved.
all got resolved. Great, thank you. So we're still kind of on target with that. Orlando is putting together, with some help from staff, a letter to go out to our current customers, what to expect coming up. First phase and second phase of that project. And the telephone replacement, we're getting closer on draft 6 of the RFP. So I'm sure this guy gets paid by the RFP or what, but by the version, but we're still on track to award that in early 2020. Any questions?
So just in follow-up note of demand response software. Orlando sent out a mailer to be distributed. That's going to be distributed early next week.
Yeah, they said 7 days, and they got the letter yesterday, so, yeah, by next week, it should physically be in
What was the total number of folks that we have?
2,700.
2,700, yeah.
2,700, yeah.
But to supplement that, working with our partners over at Ramp, they're going to be emailing that out to their database of users, many of which are the same. So some folks are going to get a double, doubling up on that, but make sure we get everybody to capture this. So as Dan mentioned, quite a bit going on with the facility expansion project. We are, as of today, under contract with Scandrolli. So we'll be, we had a preliminary meeting with them earlier this week just to talk about some logistical items. One of which is when we're expecting to break ground. And so based on their timelines currently, with contract signed, they'll look to break ground the week of November 11th. So they'll take over the parking lot across the street and close that off. They're in the process of providing notifications, signage in the lot to let people know. They did put up signage on Mulberry, some various message boards that were put up earlier this week or in the last week, notifying folks about the closure of Mulberry. So Mulberry will be closing as of the week of November 18th. So work on the lot begins the 11th, and then closure and then work on the street. So that's what's planned on that. We put together a external communication that we'll be sending out here shortly by the end of this week, just as a notification to the public about one, advising about Scandrolli being the contractor, but two, just the phases of the project and when things are ready to kick off. We've done some preliminary outreach to our neighbors. We did that actually last week to let them know and give them a heads up, including Court Street, Ferguson Law, which has corner property here to the lot, Firestone and Rosecrans. So did some outreach with them already. When the work on Mulberry close, or when the work on Mulberry starts, closing the street, we'll also be closing the front entrance. So we'll immediately be transitioning into a temporary entrance that'll be at the corner of Winnebago and Mulberry, just south of the Mulberry intersection on Winnebago. We'll be bringing a temporary entrance into the sidewall and then having an elevated walkway that'll connect into the base of the stairs down by the elevator. So by next board meeting, you'll be seeing some changes to that. So all of our camera and comm systems will be relocated over there in the meantime. Aside from that, the only immediate changes will be related to some reroutes that we'll be implementing. Some of the routes that serve Mulberry here. Staff is finalizing the details on those changes. And it's not major. I mean, it's a block here, block there that will be turning earlier or different. It may involve a change in a berth, but we'll be getting that information out to folks as well. And that's one which we make a berth change, for instance, just out of convenience by changing the direction. We can communicate that here on site. So it doesn't really impact hardly any bus stops in the immediate area because most of our stops are about 2 blocks away from downtown transfer center in any direction. So those are some things to expect and how we're doing some outreach on that. Obviously, the city's been notified of that and they're coordinating from their side, but ready to get started. So, any questions on any of that? Great. There's nothing else on those matters. We'll move on to the rest of the agenda. E4 Human Resources, so including your packet was the claims history for September. As you can see, we were below last September, below year to date, so trending positively thus far. But obviously, from prior reports that fluctuates on a month-to-month basis. What's going on? So, but good news so far for September. Moving on, then we have E5 Marketing, Orlando.
Yeah, just one contract, Janesville Convention and Visitors Bureau. They are reading up on their signs, tailgate sign, tail light signs, for the upcoming months.
We need a motion to
Yeah.
approve. I'll make the motion to approve the advertising contract with the Juneville Convention and Visitors Bureau.
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Just a side note, Orlando's been coordinating with Cedric and his team on preparing for Stroll on State. As you recall, we had that approval of the extra service to support that effort. And so looking forward that's into end of next month. Other items to note is you probably saw Orlando sent out a press release for the election free rides, provide some advanced notification to the community on that. We'll follow up with a reminder about that as we get closer. So good feedback on that. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we're putting out a release later this week on an update to the project for the community. So we'll probably see something in that. Sure.
Back to the groundbreaking.
Yeah.
So we could November 11th.
That's when they'll start work.
Is that gonna be just their work, but not
Their-
official?
Their work. I'm
Gotcha.
waiting for some details on whether there's going to be any official thing, but we tried to coordinate a couple different dates here on the calendar when the governor and staff was in town, but just couldn't carve out enough time. And so we'll look to push that. No reason to delay the project. We may do something shortly after. So you can expect that. We'll follow up with some details when we know.
Thank you.
We'll have hard hits for all of you guys too.
And a nice shovel.
No.
So if nothing else on marketing, we'll move on to the next section. We don't have anything this month on grants. Safety and training is the next item. E7 included in your report was the update for September from Trex. Were there any questions on that information? Or any information you'd like to share?
No, it's pretty well up to date. We've got everything ready to roll with the final approval for the PDAS committee, which will be the entire packet, and that'll go to the next board meeting for the annual approval for the following year. So we'll move forward with it. The numbers are looking a lot better.
Right. So with that, we'll do the review of the performance metrics for the year and reevaluation of those, and whether we're changing in the targets, and then obviously any changes based on internal changes or federal changes that were required in the plan will be reflected in that plan update that we need to do on a daily basis. So that'll be next. There's no further questions on that. We'll move on to other business. So first item we have in your packet was approval of IFB 23-03 change order number 1 related to the facility expansion project. So Paula, do you want to walk us through that?
It's a big project. It's a lot of money. So let's start at the top. Back in July, we opened the bids and Controller Construction had the lowest for the base bid at $29,577,000. Then in August, we brought it to the board and the board approved us awarding the base bid. After that, we started looking around to see what kind of federal funds that we have and what priority projects were alternates to that bid. We actually, in September, we applied for, and the board approved us applying for the Congressional Directed Spending Grant, which totaled $2,318,333. So as we looked at priority projects, we looked at the electric charging station along with installation as well as the generator and its installation. So we looked at the alternate of IFB 2303, and the one is the generator and the installation. Scandrolli was low bid on that for $359,000. And then we looked at the alternate number 2, which was the electric bus charging installation only. And that was for, again, Scandrolli was low bid at $775,000. What we're coming to the board with is to ask the board if we could do a change order to the current bid, base bid, up to Scandrolli. I don't know, that's kind of tricky. Anyway, it's Scandrolli. So our RMTD is going to request the board approved change order number 1 for the amount of $1,134,000 to IFB 2303, which is the rehabilitation, renovation, and expansion of Mulberry Street project, to Constrolli Construction. I apologize if they're listening to this. For alternates, E1 generator and E2, the electric bus charging installation, contingent on the federal funding grant being executed. Is that enough? I mean, if you have any questions, it's just a lot of information. I know Ashley's new, so, but I wanted to at least run through it, kind of what we've been doing with that project. Mike?
I'll just mention that, the bids, original bid was good for 90 days, right? And we've gone under contract now with Scandrolli. One of the provisions within the bids that was that the alternate bids, of which we didn't have enough state money to fund, were still good for 120 days. So that means 30 more days that these bids are good, on pricing they provided in all bids. Just happened that their bids were in both the areas that we were looking at funding, the priority items, the electrical infrastructure installation with chargers and the generator. We wanted to move forward with that. And so we had 30 more days of those prices were good with Scandrolli to do that. As we mentioned before, we had that, once we got the bids in and we knew where we stood relative to how much of the state funds we had left, we started looking at our bucket of federal funds, which we had set aside and said, had these for contingency type of funding in the event that the state funding was. So it worked out that, yes, now we're going to have to go ahead and execute a grant application for the earmark that we had received previously, the congressionally directed spending, to leverage that to fund those alternates. So that was what you did before. And so now that, it's in a grant, or we've applied for the grant, the FTA just simply has to execute that grant once we get all the details together for them and the requests. But we want to make sure that we don't lose this opportunity to leverage the bid pricing that we have, because the longer we wait, the more the prices will go up, and then we may have to go out for bid then. So that's why we want to get authorization to execute change order now, is to, one, leverage the pricing. We've got the funding dedicated. We just need FTA to give us the final sign off on that. And that's why it is contingent, that contingency line is.
Right, but we did not want to miss this opportunity. So if
Yes.
it has 120 days, then it's a different whole bid situation.
Right.
So at this point, if we could actually, with the, intention to actually award this change order, we could all hold the price for it.
Yeah. So that's the manner we put for a while.
I did have a question just on the alternates.
Yeah.
There was a number of alternates, right? These were just two of a few.
Yes,
Sorry.
correct.
Not to interrupt, but if you look at the remainder of the funds of that congressional directed funding, we're going to be actually going out to bid for the electric charging station itself.
Right.
So if you notice, that's not part of the bid.
Correct.
So we did not pick any other alternates to the current bid because we need that funds to actually get the electric charging station itself.
Yeah.
So we intend to go out for bid for that and use the remaining money from the earmark on that.
But to your question, there were 4 alternates.
Mhm.
These were the high priority ones. The other 2 related to exterior finishes on the current facility, wall, brick, and what was the other item? Or both of them were those items.
That's easy for both sides.
Both.
yeah.
2 walls.
2 walls, yes.
2 walls. Right.
Is there any motion?
I'll move that we approve IFB 23-03 change order number 1.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Thank you.
Thank you. Next item we have is an update on the BRT corridor analysis study. So included in your packet is the details of the study that we've been engaged with Sam Swartz and Associates in partnership with R1PC. I think I touched upon most of this at our last meeting, but just wanted to, instead of verbal, provide the documentation of where we're at and you can visualize it and see, where we have, some of this, what the data looks like and the decision points we're at relative to, making choices here. If we want to, look for more detailed analysis on some of the corridors that we've identified. But ultimately, big picture, going back, the MTP, the Metropolitan Transportation Plan, has BRT as a long-term project, right? Where this study helps us long-term is that we have the opportunity now with that in the plan is to start identifying specific corridors that we can indicate within the plan that we're really focused in on long-term improvement and service enhancements. This study, again, is a roadmap for us, one from an education standpoint to stakeholders in the community, but also a informative piece of what does BRT mean, what could it look like, and here are the related costs, not only capital, which was readily available capital, but here is the impact operationally on the expense side, which, you know, that's a more specific community conversation. And how does that get funded? We can put all the capital if we want towards it, but to operationalize it, it requires a local match, and this outlines overall costs of what that would look like and what we potentially need to consider budget-wise to have a local match to fund it. So I can turn this over to Brandon to kind of walk us through the slides and the process that's gone through, and we can, between the two of us, answer any questions you may have about what we looked at, how we got to where we're at, and considerations going forward. So, Brandon.
Thanks, Michael. Yeah, so you know, like Michael was saying, we've been working with Sam Schwartz, and you know, I can just kind of run through some of these slides with you guys, talk about them in a little bit more detail. But as you all are probably aware, over the past few months, Sam Schwartz has been working on selecting some recommended BRT corridors, and for that they use the existing fixed routes from RMTD, the weekday Saturday routes with over 100 average daily users. Some of the routes ranked a little higher in certain categories, which the scoring criteria is on that third slide there. But combining the routes in, I believe on the second page, kind of offers a more holistic combined view of some of the I guess feasibility for some of the different routes and, you know, how well they rank among the others. In which case, East State was identified as kind of the favorites. We had a workshop, I think a couple months ago, with Sam Schwartz, course members of RMTD and R1 staff, where we kind of discussed the feasibility of some of their recommendations, and East State was the favorite, but there was also a second BRT corridor identified, which was Kishwaukee, linked with either North Main or Brockton Ave and having connections with Riverside Boulevard. And then in addition to the recommended corridors, Sam Schwartz also provided the project team with operating and service cost projections, just to give us an idea of some of the financial implications for the proposed BRT services. And these operating costs are based on the current 2024 allocated rates, summed to a full year, and are differentiated by the proposed levels of service. So we were provided concepts for different levels of BRT service on each of the recommended corridors. Key takeaway from that, which I believe is on the slide, summary of operating costs, was that BRT would likely be the strongest on the west half of Route 11 due to higher productivity, less challenging land use, and just overall funding competitiveness. And the table for those operating costs, like I said, is the fourth slide on that. Sorry, I think I have a different set of slides from you guys, but summary of operating costs. And the last column in this table, titled the last column in this table represents the operating costs if an underlying service still ran the full current length of the route and stayed in service along with BRT. So just an example of that would be Route 11 continuing to make some of its local deviations along its full length, while BRT either operates on just the west half or the full length of the route. And then there were also some additional fleet requirements for each of the proposed corridors with different levels of BRT service. And as mentioned, the hourly underlying service would require an additional 2 buses to retain service for either of those routes. So depending on the kind of intensity or the level of BRT, it would require, more or less vehicles to operate it. And then Sam Schwartz also provided us with capital cost projections that were based on the level of necessary investment into each of the segments. Projects were derived from peer agencies, capital cost ranges, and don't adjust for inflation. So yeah, and then additionally, we did discuss kind of just some grant strategies as well as a drafted roadmap of phased improvements for near-term, medium-term, and long-term recommendations. Yeah, so if you guys have any questions, either Michael or I, or if Michael wants to add anything to that.
What I was gonna mention is as we looked at this, going all the way back to slide ranking of routes on COVID and then ranking of corridors. And, as we looked at route segments and pairing route segments, some were stronger than others. And really in terms of our evaluation, there seemed to be, a south route corridor, Kishwaukee, paired with something that we landed on, determining whether that is North Main or a Rockton Riverside one. We had some discussion back and forth on the pros and cons, just purely based on consistent route, ridership and demand growth potential and serving multiple communities. The Rockton Riverside one I thought was a little more favorable, but there was some rationale for the future growth potential of North Main and some of the areas that may be developed up there as well, that could drive some of that discussion. Obviously, you've got the business part of north end of North Main as well, as we do on the south end there, just being a question of which may be the best fit. So I don't think we're quite at the place where we need to make a decision yet, but we wanted to analyze both for future consideration and kind of weigh those further as the market progresses and development progresses. The other piece I would mention is that we talk about the what does low, medium, and high mean in terms of frequencies. There, the potential operating plans. We detail what that may look like in terms of peak, off peak, and level of intensity. We're just talking about generally for it to be a low level of service, that's 15-minute service. Right? And some of these routes currently now have hour service. So get to that point is a serious investment in a level of service to get there. State Street, not quite as much because of it already being a 30-minute frequency, but that begins the full length of the route. And so as we're looking at summary of operating costs, that's where you get into these potential approaches that we may look at outside of maybe a high capital investment, a increase in service and just ramping up service to get to a low BRT level to demonstrate both the ridership commitment and just what the overall demand would be. That kind of flushes itself out in summary of operating costs is that just to get, offering a low level of service at 15-minute frequency is going to cost us this much per year. And that's, that's the net operating cost impact, no underlying service, for instance, that's $2.5 million for a full length route. If we want to also include that 15-minute frequency, if you add an underlying service, now you're at 4.5 million, in addition to what we're already spending per year. So this gives us an idea of just the operating cost of things, an increase to the budget. As well as on the next slide, the fleet requirements, it gives us a indication of how many vehicles we're talking about. What's the plus up on just on capital, just to have vehicles to run that service. And that's not only if you invested in the capital improvements for street infrastructure, it's just, do we have vehicles today to increase the service to run that level of service, which this helps us identify, what that would look like too, right? It's 4 more vehicles than we have on the route today, for instance, or in this case, I think, the BRT West half is 6 vehicles a day. So we already have 4 vehicles a day on there. We need 2 more vehicles a day to add to that, just to have it running at 15-minute frequency. So this kind of outlines that piece for us. And so if we talk about road mapping, this kind of helps us identify both an operating budget, vehicle, what we need for additional vehicles, and then what's the overall investment for things like TSP, transit priority, stop level improvements, stations, like there's various levels of investment on that, but the BRT cost projections and generally outline what that investment would be. What kind of money are we talking about? So as we look at peers, common cost per mile for certain levels of BRT, as indicated in the west half of Route 11, that capital investment, just infrastructure on the street, would be $40 million to $77 million for a 5-mile segment. So that helps us understand, where from a grant funding perspective, you would need to look to find that money, right? Are there federal programs? Are there state programs? Are there a combination of those that you'd have to look at? That's the final slide, but that's kind of the information altogether that we've been working through with the consultant, identifying what are the various paths we may want to pursue over the next 5, 10, 15 years on developing out corridors, and at least having it identified in your metropolitan transportation plan and having corridors indicated in there, it gives you the basis to apply for any one of these types of paths that you'd like to proceed. And then obviously with that, there's a lot of stakeholder input into those. And as you can see from these corridors, a lot of those are not only City of Rockford corridors, but also IDOT corridors. And so there's part of that. And then there may be multi-jurisdictional corridors relative to municipalities being involved. And it's Riverside, then it's not just Rockford, it's also Loves Park as well. And so you get some complexities there, but also some opportunities for partnering projects. So that in general is just going to be information we have to share, where we're at in the process. We're refining this information into a draft report. So over the next month, they'll be completing that task, and they'll have something to us by December that we can share with the board as a compiling of all this information, so we can sit down and review that, and we'll bring Sam Swartz in and they can walk us through the entire thing. But this is where we're at in this step in the process. Just want to share that and you can update, let you ask questions, or maybe think about questions you might have, and they come back at the next one. Anything?
Question about this is the slide on BRT capital cost projections.
Yeah.
The typologies used. Is that saying that 30, so for each of these, let's just look at the west half of Route 11, I guess, for the sake of it, 12% low. So 12% of the route would experience those low headway projections, the 15 minutes and then 81% would experience a 10-minute way.
If I could, I believe that has to do with the actual segments, because they looked at all of the different segments, like a lot smaller portions, and then they looked at the level of investment that would be needed for each of the like individual segments. So that doesn't have to do with the level of service that it would experience, but like level of investment necessary for the segment. Based on like current infrastructure and things like that.
So when they look at that span, so 40 million, 77 million, 12% of, I think, the instances that they looked at, or the examples they looked at would be on the low end of that range, whereas in between, pick the number in between 40 and 77, that's where 80% of the projects spent in that range, and in the high range, that's 77%, or the 77 million would be the 7% of projects that we looked at. So that's more the typologies used, or the examples, and that's how we drew that range from, is the variety of projects.
So nothing to do with service, just to do with
Correct.
the
Yeah.
projection.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Anything else come to mind?
I think, well, one, this is a really good report, and for me, this is really helpful for, the community has had moments throughout the decades about, what does it look like to get our headways to a certain threshold, and to me, this is the most information I've seen to date in terms of the actual investment and impact for the community. And I would be very curious as we're moving forward, where the community is at today as it relates to, these sort of outcomes around public transportation and the value of BRT, and just understanding where the community is at. And then my other comment is just, what I see here on the potential operating plan slide, right? A lot of this gets into land use. I mean, it's a significant changes that the community would have to undertake to make this successful. So just a lot more analysis and discussions ahead.
I think in the consultant Sam Swartz is here. I think that's a good topic is when we're talking about a level of investment, what does that mean in terms of roadway changes? Most of this, very low percentage of this would mean dedicated right away. Just because of the operating environments that we're looking at here, and but certainly curb access and what's happening in that space is certainly still a big one part of that. But yeah, you're right. I mean, one of the things we talked about in this is just around land use, it's just opportunity for investment and how to leverage the investment in infrastructure with housing, right, and access, and talk about reducing travel times and making sure that folks have an equal opportunity, whether you're in a car or using transit to get from one side of the town to the other in a timely fashion. These are the types of things that investments that are needed to help make transit competitive. So,
and in your early, I guess, discussions of what funding was available, are there funding sources that are specific to BRT, or is it in general for transportation improvements?
So for BRT, most large projects, I'll call them large, similar to what Madison has implemented. They leverage federal programs called Small Starts, which are CIG programs, so congressional directed spending. And so there's a very rigorous process that you go through for that, and certain thresholds you have to meet. And so some of that gets into, where the initial level of services, or what's the ridership that you're at before you implement that. So very competitive program, but it's, like I said, it's rigorous, but there's larger funding sources out there. Smaller funding sources that could be applied to more of an incremental basis would be like the bus and bus facilities discretionary grant program. Which we've been leveraging for capital for vehicle replacements. That's a program that could be leveraged for this. Going back to the rebuild program at the state level, with the opportunities under that old program to do that. And obviously, as the state continues forward with their capital program, there may be some opportunities in the future for that in its form where they're going to fund state capital using their PAYGO funding that was dedicated to state transit at the state level from more fuel tax. It goes in the transit funding budget. So yeah, CIG could do it all, but super ultra competitive. And depending on what your strategy is, there may be other things that you could incrementally do over a period of time. So that's part of what we've asked them to look at as well. What are, depending on what path you pick, what are the different scenarios we can look at. If there's nothing else, then that's all we have today. We do have an executive session on the agenda. So before we get into that, next meeting.
Next meeting is scheduled for December the 9th, 3:30 p.m.
And as of right now, we don't need a November 25th.
Next regularly scheduled meeting was the 25th
25th
of
of
November.
November.
But due to the auditor's presentation and some other factors,
Mhm.
the auditor will not have their presentation ready for the 25th. So we'll look at December.
December 9th
So the next.
at 3:30. And therefore, then there's no need for a December 23rd board meeting.
We can combine those two meetings together.
Correct. Okay.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay. All right.
Don't
Then
you
we'll-
post executive session?
We'll go into executive session to discuss the semi-annual review of executive session meeting minutes pursuant to 5 ILCS 122C21 and to discuss collective bargaining matters pursuant to 5 ILCS 122C2 of the Illinois Open Meetings Act.
So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Yes, because we.
Session.
For E8D, matters arising out of executive session pursuant to 5 ILCS 122C21 of the Illinois Open Meetings Act, no less than semi-annually, a public body must meet to review the minutes of the closed session meeting minutes. And we have done so. The executive session meeting minutes from the board meetings presented have been reviewed by myself, the Open Meetings Act officer, with the advisement of counsel of what perimeters to follow in deciding what executive session meeting minutes may be made available for public inspection and ones where there is a continued need for confidentiality. RMTD recommends the need for confidentiality still exists to the executive session meeting minutes as presented and therefore should not be made available for public inspection. RMTD staff is requesting the RMTD board approve to keep the presented executive session meeting minutes confidential. So we need a vote for that, please. I'll make the motion to keep the listed minutes confidential.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
On the agenda.
Motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
59 minutes.
It's important.
It is.